Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome back to Diaries with Debbie Friday. Today, I'm going to be talking about the technological extension of both the mind and the body and its repercussions. Basically, that's like a fancy way of saying that I'm talking about humans and technology and peptides and AI and looksmaxxing and McLuhan and Toby Shorin and money, of course, which is my favorite. Mind you, I just woke up, but I'm really excited about this topic this time around, and this is going to be a very special episode because it's going to be really fucking long. I'm going to talk about technology and the self as well as technology and the other, and there's a lot of stuff to get through, and I promise there are hope frequencies that come in at the end, as always. But this is going to be a very nerdy one, you guys, so without further ado, let's get into it. So, starting off, the reason I felt the impetus to make this episode is because I'm an artist and I'm interested in what is happening in culture, what is happening in the world. Obviously, it's part of my whole thesis with this podcast and it's part of the way that I live my life, but it's also deeper than that. In the last episode that I did, I talked a little bit at the end about Marshall McLuhan and how he said that artists were the antenna of the human race and that it was our job to pick up the signals and tell the world about the changes to come. And I can feel that there is a huge shift and change happening in the way that we relate to and work with technology. And I know that this change has to do with the body, it has to do with the environment, it has to do with our relationships to one another, and it has to do with money and the economy, of course. It's probably like the biggest part. And it has to do with power, it has to do with where power is located, where it moves, how it shapes things. And it also primarily has to do with this like existential question of what is a human being? What is a body? What is a mind? Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing to ourselves? And I'm going to break it all down and I'm going to tell you what I think and what I know. And I'm going to say it in my way. I'm going to tell the truth and make it beautiful. Also, if you haven't already, just hit that subscribe button on YouTube or Apple or Spotify or wherever you're listening to this on. That just lets me know that people are interested in what I'm talking about and that you want me to continue making this podcast. Thank you. So, speaking of Marshall McLuhan, this train of thought started when I started reading his work more closely. I read his book, The Medium is the Message, or The Medium is the Massage, which was essentially an essay in graphic novel format. It's really cool. You guys should try to pick up a copy if you can. And then I also read The Medium is the Message, which is the first chapter from his book, Understanding Media, The Extensions of Man. And that phrase, the medium is the message, was originally coined by Marshall McLuhan in that book. And it became one of the foundational ideas of media studies. When Marshall McLuhan says the medium is the message, he means that the form of the medium itself is what has the most impact on a society. The form of the technology itself is what shapes a society. Essentially, he's saying that technology changes us. The contents of that technology can be whatever, but that's not what's most important. It's the technology itself that's most important because the technology is what changes the scale or pace or pattern of human affairs. That is how we live, how we work, how we talk, how we think, how we relate, and so on and so on. And this technology, this medium can be anything. In his book and in his work, he gives a lot of examples. So, for example, he talks about the medium of movies, of cinema, and he talks about how it changed the way that we understood speed and time. So, movies taught people to understand the world via a sequence of images. Now, this was like a fundamental change to the way that we had previously experienced reality. Because, like, you don't experience a cut in real life, but a movie can cut between an image of a closed door during the day and like an open window at night. And you're able to understand that there is a temporal and spatial connection between those two images, even though time is being compressed via that cut. Like you didn't see the sun go down and you didn't watch the camera move from one spot to another because you didn't need to. This is the message of the medium of cinema. It's a reorganizing of our perceptions of reality so that we can watch a movie. And this kind of thing also extends into things like our social relations and how we relate to one another. For example, the medium of the movie invented a new form of shared imagination. It's the first time that we all watch and imagine the exact same images, and this changed the way that we related to one another. Going to a cinema, watching a movie with other people, that changed the way that we related to one another. When you say things like, oh, did you see One Battle After Another? Or I'm so Isabelle Huppert piano teacher coded. That is only a legible statement because of how the medium of the movie has shaped us. So anyway, this is the general idea of the meaning of the medium is the message. And you can apply that idea to basically every and any new technology. So let's start off with applying it to social media. And I'm picking social media because I think that it is at the nexus of what exactly is happening with the technological extension of both the mind and the body. It's also our primary mode of communication and information exchange in people's lives, both digitally and physically. The question to ask is, what does the medium of social media produce in us? What patterns of behavior and perception does it shape within us, And I've sort of broken it down into 4 core pillars, 4 core tenets. And this is not like a comprehensive list because, of course, social media does a lot to us, but I'm taking it as like a place to start. And when I say social media, I'm specifically referring to websites and apps that are based on digital social networking. So that's like your Facebook, your Instagram, TikTok, Twitter /X, LinkedIn, Tumblr, etc., etc. And it's also not a strict category in the sense that, for example, YouTube is a kind of social media, but it's also a video /sharing platform. So you know what I mean, okay, when I say social media. So getting into these 4 pillars. So firstly, what the medium of social media produces in us is that it reorganizes our societal architecture so that attention becomes the central economic unit of life. Everything becomes about getting attention or measuring attention or paying for attention or diverting attention or collecting attention, Everything becomes about attention to the point that it can be seen as more valuable than actual currency. Think about it. Like, after all, people pay to have paparazzi take photos of them or to have crazy articles written about them. People pay to have their privacy invaded in order to garner attention. People spend hours upon hours of their time online streaming or posting content or going live in order to generate attention. People go on vacation and they buy certain clothes and they even have entire babies in order to generate attention online. That attention is constantly measured in terms of views, likes, and followers. And it's measured in order to figure out how to garner more of it. Even people who are already rich or who have other markers of like success or class power, they all also want attention. Attention is basically become the central economic unit of life via social media. So the second pillar of what social media produces in us is the collapse of cognitive context via the endless scroll /endless feed. Now, I remember when you used to just scroll to the end of Facebook and choose whether or not you wanted to see the next page. Like, from what I remember though, like I believe it was actually Tumblr that was the first social media to have an endless feed. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not too sure on that, but I remember it being Tumblr where you could like, I just remember that you could either customize your personal blog page to either have a certain number of posts per page, or you could have the option to make it an endless feed so people could just keep scrolling. But I remember that the main blog feed page where you could see all the people that you were subscribed to, that was endless scroll. And it would just keep going and going and going. And you didn't have to click next page. And mind you, this was back when like people were accessing social media via websites, not apps. Because I feel like by the time that apps became the primary route of access, the endless scroll was already a thing, which is crazy just to think about internet history in this way. But anyway, this endless scroll creates a collapse of cognitive context. Everything that is ever happening and being posted about gets collapsed into one stream of information delivery. War, cooking video, your friend's birthday trip, political address, some celebrity red carpet, memes, snuff videos, assassinations, OnlyFans ads, like everything just appears in the same exact visual field, which flattens the context and it actually numbs us as a viewer to what we're seeing in order to process the flow of information. And now I'm not going to argue about whether this is like good or bad, but I will say is that it's strange, isn't it? Like if you consider that within this endless feed, attention is the main form of currency, it's even stranger when you consider what gets the most attention in a space like that. Like just think about it. Also, the endless scroll begets endless consumption. If there is no end to content, then there is always more to consume, more information, more food, and therefore the impetus to always be consuming. So, the third pillar of what the medium of social media produces in us is the increased dominance of the image over every other experience of reality. Life becomes not about your experience, but rather your documentation of said experience, i.e., pics or it didn't happen. Even Marshall McLuhan talks about this. He talks about how print is what introduced visual culture to society because now it's your eye that is interpreting information. It's interpreting letters and numbers and it's arranging the world for you. Prior to this, it was the ear. We had oral cultures. Nothing was written down and you had to be told and you had to listen. And now I'm going to read you a passage from The Medium is the Massage. Oh, wait, let me just get my papers. Marshall McLuhan writes, the dominant organ of sensory and social orientation in pre-alphabet societies was the ear. Hearing was believing. Until writing was invented, men lived in acoustic space, boundless, directionless, horizonless, in the dark of the mind, in the world of emotion, by primordial intuition, by terror. So that's what he wrote back in 1964. But nowadays, you can watch everything in 2x speed. Like, I wouldn't even call it seeing, really. It's this like rapid visual scanning that's happening rather than a deep kind of seeing or watching, honestly, because there is so much endless information that we are processing these days. The eye kind of like functions as more of a sorting device that's cluing into visual context signals rather than as an organ for the contemplation of visual stimuli. And it's almost like this quick watching is what actually counts rather than whatever is being watched. Like, for example, a lot of podcasts now are actually video podcasts, not because the image actually adds anything to the content of what is being discussed or to the medium of podcasting itself, but it's being done because in order to generate attention on social media, you need images. You need short form video that you throw up to promote your podcast or whatever you got going on. Not me though. Anyway, okay. And lastly, the fourth pillar that the medium of social media produces in us is that it changes the concept of identity into something modular and public. The idea of the self is no longer private, but the self is now your public profile as it is experienced by others. This was an experience of reality that used to be reserved basically for like celebrities and people in, the highest offices of government and other high profile public facing people in society. But now everyone's an influencer. Everyone is a celebrity, whether you like it or not. And because the self is now public, you also tend to spend a lot more time like looking at yourself or thinking about yourself in order to try to gauge what the public is seeing or thinking about you. There's a reason why the phone is called a black mirror. It's a reflective object that inherently like bounces back images of whatever is looking right at it. And, that's you, baby. Like, so with all this looking at yourself, what happens is that your concept of self becomes public, yes, but also modular, meaning that it's possible to like tweak and edit and optimize and, switch out any elements of self for others. Your identity becomes a list of components, or you could say like stats, instead of a whole holistic thing in itself. Okay, so those are the four main pillars of what social media as a medium does to our patterns of behavior and perception, and they all kind of flow into one another. But the question now is, what does this have to do with the body, with body technology? Well, again, we go back to Marshall McLuhan. So he believed that all media, all technology, were extensions of the human body. They are ways in which we extend ourselves into the technological field or space. Specifically, he said that electric media is an extension of the human nervous system in particular. So if we take what he says to be true, then I think we can say that via electric technologies such as social media and the smartphone, our insides have been turned outside. They've been extended from the body and externalized into a digital container, into these digital networks. This externalization of our nervous system also externalizes sensation, which is what the nervous system does. It's a sensing system. It processes sensation. It's an internal communication network, and it regulates all these different things that are happening inside of your body, and it processes all sorts of stimuli. Oh, guys, it's early. And when that is externalized, as it is via social media, all of that processing starts happening outside of the body. And if we go back to the second and third pillars of what the medium of social media produces in us, remember the second pillar is the collapse of cognitive context via the endless feed/endless scroll. The third pillar is the dominance of the image over every other experience of reality. If we go back to these pillars, we can see how something like social media actually disembodies us. It removes us from our body and from experiencing or sensing or processing in the body. Instead, we are doing all of that nervous system activity in and on our phones. So it's like, not only are you no longer a private fixed self, but you're also no longer a physical body. The physical body kind of becomes this old technology that's used as a means to access the assumed like real body, which is now the digital body or the online self. And you can literally see this through the fact that, more and more people are experiencing life digitally. They're not actually experiencing reality as it is around them. They're experiencing their feeds, their notifications. You know how people used to say that the internet is not real life and blah, blah, blah. That is just not true anymore. Like, they are one and the same. Real life now includes the internet. And I mean, just look at streamers, for example, like that latest guy that's really popular right now, that clavicular kid. I'm going to talk about him and the whole like looksmaxxing movement. I'm going to talk about them like more later, but that guy is not experiencing reality in his body. He's experiencing it through digital technologies, namely social media. Social media invented looksmaxxing. Like, everything that he's got going on is a consequence of his nervous system being externalized into digital electric technologies. And this is happening to all of us. No one is immune, including myself. And just as a side note, like, I don't want this to turn into a whole rant about condemning social media, because that's not what it's about. There's a lot of really good things about social media, and there are, of course, arguments to be made in favor of this kind of technological extension of the mind and the body. It really has allowed us to do so much good, and it's allowed for just like incredible magical innovations in the world. Like, I love the internet, guys. I love social media. I love my computer. But anyway, like, I'm not trying to condemn all of this stuff. I just want to look at it critically. I want to understand what has happened to us and what is happening to us as a result of our technologies. I want to understand the world that we inhabit. And in this quest to understand, I came upon Toby Shorin's new essay called Body Futurism. Toby Shorin is a writer, thinker, slash technologist that I've followed on and off for the last few years. He wrote my favorite essay in 2018. It's called The Diminishing Marginal Value of Aesthetics, and everyone should go and read it right now. It's really incredible. And then after that, you should read his new essay, Body Futurism, after. It's also really interesting, and I'm going to talk about it. So, rewinding again, if we go off of McLuhan's theory that electric media externalizes our nervous system, that our technology extends our bodies, and then from there, my assumption that we actually become disembodied through this process, that we lose feeling in our physical body, but we gain almost this like hypersensitivity in our digital bodies. And this is a process that's been happening since the advent of digital technology, since the first computer, and it just keeps evolving and evolving. So if we go from there, I would say that we're at a point societally where this process has essentially been fully saturated into culture. When I was reading McLuhan, he kind of had this techno-optimist view of this process. He thought that these new technologies would lead to a kind of electronic, interdependent global village where people would be free and work together and learn together in this very like utopian vision of a new electric world. Like essentially he thought that there would be like an electric age that would bring us back to orality and towards like a collective identity. At least that's the way that I interpreted it. Like, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but I felt like he was giving techno optimism. And mind you, he was writing in the 1960s, so the electric technology that they had was like television and microwaves and radio. I mean, I guess they did go to the moon, allegedly, okay? But basically, I'm just trying to say that this is all before the internet. The electric technology that he was dealing with could almost be seen as like a primitive form of the electric technology that we have now. They weren't dealing with slot machine 3000s and algorithmic pricing mechanisms. Like they weren't dealing with like robots that could do backflips and breakdancing and surveillance machines that could see through your walls using Wi-Fi. Like they didn't have all this stuff that we got going on. And I'm not a tech doomer or anything. Like I said, like I love my computer, but comparing now to the 60s, the electric technology that we have today just has like a sinister vibe. It does, okay? Like in a lot of ways, yes, you could say it's hope-filled, but it also like it just has a sinister vibe, and it's 1,000 times more complex and much more embedded into our everyday lives. So when I think of McLuhan's techno-optimism, I'm kind of like, I don't know about that one, Chief. If anything, I feel like people have become more isolated and more divided than ever. The global villages that do exist are largely being created by algorithmic fences these days anyway. And even beyond that, it's not even just a case of complexity. It's also about who controls said electric technology. Like it doesn't just exist out there in the world, these are products that we use. If electric technology is an extension of the senses that we use to make sense of the world, then whoever controls said electric technology controls the sense that we make of the world. And who controls it? Let's just say that it's not benevolent, socialistic, global village minded people. And again, everything comes down to money. It comes down to financial interests and incentives. Like the battle that's being waged with something like AI, for example, is not actually one of moral considerations or even really like a socio-political or utility consideration. It just doesn't matter if you like AI or not. It doesn't matter if it's technically a net good for society or not. It doesn't matter if it's used by the left or the right. It doesn't matter if it's truly useful or not. Honestly, it's about money. Can this technology create more wealth? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, that it gets funded and subsidized and the economy is reoriented in that direction because it is in corporate financial interest to do so. And if it's in corporate interest, then it's a very specific set of people who have control over the sense-making organs of the whole world. I'm not even saying this in some conspiratorial way. Like, I'm saying it in like just a common sense economic analysis kind of way. Like I said, these are products. Someone creates them and sells them, and then we buy them. So anyway, back to Toby Shorin and his essay Body Futurism. In this essay, Toby kind of starts off with the idea that our age is not one of a techno utopia, but rather he mentions that we're experiencing a kind of exhaustion with technology, with these disembodied digital spaces. It's been years and years of the internet, of crypto, virtual reality, of slop, of social media, etc. And we're just fried. We're fried. Also, the economic potentialities have been exhausted in a lot of ways. This is part of the reason why there's no new fancy, shiny apps that large swaths of the population are flocking to. The narrative that you can get rich off of creating the new Facebook is not being repeated anymore because it's not true. There's just collective exhaustion. So now, what is happening, as per Toby Shorin, is that the body is becoming the site of contemporary thought. The physical and embodied self is what people are looking at and thinking about, both personally and socially and economically. He says the Republic is turning its mind inward. And now I think that there's a lot of reasons for this, and they all have to do with how we've changed as human beings as a result of our technologies. But I specifically want to talk about two reasons. So the first is the more cynical one, which is that the body is being seen as the new economy, straight up. Shorin talks about techno optimism and its techno utopian fantasies, and how one of the things that was promised was that utopia would be achieved via software, and the software utopia has to be accessed through a screen. But that promise has largely fallen flat and actually been disproven because we're all plugged into the screen, but we're not in utopia. We're in a scary place, guys. And again, I say this as someone who, I love my computer, I love the internet, but it seems as though what proliferates via software can often be pretty scary. So now the fantasy of utopia has shifted from being sold via software to being sold via the body. And here's where I come back around and I bring up looksmaxxing again, because that is a direct materialization of this phenomenon. If you don't know what looksmaxxing is, essentially it's like this subculture that started with young men on the internet who basically just like trade tips and tricks on how to become more attractive, how to like look good. And the methods range from stuff like going on minoxidil to prevent hair loss to things like smashing your face with a hammer to promote bone growth. Yeah. The more extreme stuff is called hard maxing, and there's a lot of variety in what you can do, apparently, but that's the general gist of the subculture. But I would say it's kind of like becoming less and less of a subculture, and it's more of like a mainstream niche in that most young people know what it is. Like, it's not really obscure anymore. And one of the young men who's part of this subculture, he got famous recently. His name is Clavicular, and he's been on the news a bunch. I'm sure you've seen him. Anyway, looksmaxxing is a thing, and it's all about body technology. It's all about this promise of utopia via the body. It tells young men that the world is rigged and you won't be able to get ahead via your intellect or your education or working hard or being a good person. So you should just give up on all of that and try to get as good looking as possible, because that's your best chance at getting what you want, i.e., girls and money. And truly, it is like a nihilistic ideology because it doesn't have any hope in it. It doesn't see any meaning or value or purpose in the journey of life itself or in other people, even. It's just like pure negative utilitarianism. I don't know if I'm using that word correctly, but you know what I'm trying to say. So now these young men are obsessed with figuring out ways to make their bodies look more attractive because they believe that there's social and economic advantages to this, and that it will solve like the fundamental problem of loneliness and a lack of purpose in their lives. Like, a lot of the men who are in like looksmaxxing, they are incel, manosphere slash like neat adjacent. And, those people are very sad and they're very lonely. Like, you cannot even imagine how lonely they are. Like, I see them on the internet all the time and I have a lot of pity for them. Like, I really do. Like, I know what loneliness does to a person. It really it can really like twist you inside out into a shape that you don't even recognize. And It makes you willing to do all sorts of crazy things, from injecting yourself with experimental peptides to getting full on like elective jaw surgery, or that insane like leg lengthening surgery where you basically can't walk for 2 years just so you could grow like 3 inches taller, you know? And all of this is done just to relieve that feeling of loneliness. And it's all seen as being worth it because of how looksmaxxing has been positioned as an answer in the inward turn of contemporary thought. You know, it takes the body and it says, here's how you can make money. Here's how you can get more attention, get love from other people, etc., etc. Do this, this, and this to your body. And all of these prescriptions and protocols and vitamins, like these things are not free. Getting surgery is not free. Peptides are not free. They're actually very expensive. And there's just like a never ending list of things that you can do to achieve and maintain your looksmaxxing. So just when you spent tens of thousands of dollars on one thing, there's something else that you can buy, something else you can spend money on. You know, and I'm going to call this like the looksmaxxing industrial complex because that's basically what it is. It's literally the same propaganda that is sold to women, re like our bodies and our looks. Like Ozempic is a peptide. Getting a BBL, the number one most dangerous surgery in the world, by the way, that's hard maxing, you know? I remember seeing the front page of Vanity Fair or like some magazine last year that was like announcing that Kris Jenner got a $250,000 facelift at 75 years old. And now she looks sexier than ever. Like, why do we need to be sexy at 75 years old? Oh, I know. So somebody can make money, $250,000 to be exact, you know? And they're making that money off of a lifetime of conditioned insecurity and reinforced low self esteem and the promise of utopia via the body. Oh, okay. Yeah. Ugh, this is a tangent, but I have like this whole thing around how old people are increasingly being marketed towards and turned into hyper consumers because of their purchasing power, you know? So instead of them giving their money to their kids or investing in the future of society, they end up giving it to corporations. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But back to this idea of the body as a new economic site. The body is essentially seen as a financial asset, as a tool for wealth creation. It takes the shape of looksmaxxing, but it also looks like body hacking, nootropics, wellness retreats, IVF sex selection, Brian Johnson's Don't Die movement, and so on and so on and so on. You know, there's a lot of money in this inward turn. And there's also a lot of attention in it. Remember the 4 pillars of social media technology that I talked about earlier. The first pillar, attention as a central economic unit of life. If you get a better body, you can get more attention, and attention is currency. In the Toby Shorin essay, he mentioned that men are mewing and women are getting Botox at 30 instead of 50 because it is perceived as an economic necessity to appear hot online. And he's right, you know? You can't even sing a goddamn song these days without having to be hot online. Like, anyway. Okay, so this is an editor's note, but I'm currently reading the David Foster Wallace book, A Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again. And in this book, I'm reading his essay on television, and he has this really good quote that I'm going to read to you guys here because I just feel like it has so much to do with what I'm talking about in this episode. So he writes, when everybody we seek to identify with for 6 hours a day is pretty, it naturally becomes more important to us to be pretty, to be viewed as pretty. Because prettiness becomes a priority for us, the pretty people on TV become all the more attractive, a cycle which is obviously great for TV, but it's less great for us civilians who tend to own mirrors and who also tend not to be anywhere near as pretty as the TV images we want to identify with. Not only does this cause some angst personally, but the angst increases because nationally, everybody else is absorbing 6-hour doses and identifying with pretty people and valuing prettiness more too. This very personal anxiety about our prettiness has become a national phenomenon with national consequences. The whole USA gets different about things it values and fears. The boom in diet ads, health and fitness clubs, neighborhood tanning parlors, cosmetic surgery, anorexia, bulimia, steroid use among boys, girls throwing acid at each other because one girl's hair looks more like Farrah Fawcett's than another. Are these supposed to be unrelated to each other, to the apotheosis of prettiness in a televisual culture? So I just really like what he wrote there. Like, I feel like it's very succinct. And it's basically what is happening now with looksmaxxing coming into mainstream culture, except it's almost like this hyper accelerated version, which is what I think happens with social media. Like, I feel like social media as a technology it's a accelerating technology. Like, it has accelerants in it for whatever reason. And it is an offshoot of TV as well, right? So, anyway, I thought that this quote was just very relevant to what I was talking about. And it also made me think about how, you know, all of these industries that uphold this idea of like attractiveness as a value, I honestly, okay, this is just a prediction I'm gonna make, but I honestly think that soon it's not even gonna be necessarily about looking pretty. Like, I do think it's gonna shift into like looking as inhuman as possible while still retaining like certain core human qualities, such as like two hands, two legs, just because I feel like we've reached peak prettiness in the sense of like via filters and um the kind of editing that people do to their faces and bodies online. We've kind of like reached this peak. I just don't see how somebody could get more attractive. And also, it's like when all this prettiness becomes widely accessible, there's a lack of scarcity, right? But in order for markets to generate wealth, they need this presumption of scarcity or this idea of scarcity in order to like drive up demand and like make people like want something. So honestly, I really do think the new thing is going to be about not looking human, but we'll see. We'll see if that pans out. Anyway, back to the rest of the episode. Like, I'm not going to deny that there are social and economic advantages and even just pure like health and physical advantages to having a more beautiful body, quote, because there are, that's the truth. Like, there's countless statistics and studies that can back that up. But what I will say is that it's not going to solve all of your problems. Like, it's just not. Like I always say, everybody suffers. You can be hot, but you're still going to have problems. You can be like the most giga chad looking motherfucker out there, but you still have to wake up in the morning and you still have to pay your bills and eat your food and put on your socks. Like, and we're all still going to be in the same collective economic conditions that we are in. Like, everyone getting hot is not going to solve world hunger or the water crisis or the scourge of the speculative economy. Like, don't be crazy, guys. It's kind of sinister, like, just my opinion, but it's kind of sinister. Like, your body just becomes another market now. Anyway, now, the second reason of why I think the body has become the site of contemporary thought has to do with the idea I talked about previously of how social media as a technology has turned our nervous systems inside out. And this reason is actually really hope-pilled / this is where the hope frequencies come in. So don't say that all I do is complain, guys, all right? Okay, this reason is the body is a site of contemporary thought precisely because people are looking to become more embodied. If our nervous systems have been turned inside out and we're left floating in digital space, there comes a point in time where there will be a desire to return to the body. You can only be numb for so long before you lose your mind. And I don't think that most people want to lose their minds. I think that in this moment right now, culture is beginning its journey of trying to find ways to re-anchor into the body, to bring sensation back into the physical realm. This is the body futurism that Toby Shorin is talking about at the end of his essay. He has this really great passage that I'm going to read to you right now, actually. So he writes, "Body politics is the politics of a society convinced of its own sickness. The techno-pessimism, gerontocracy, and senile nostalgia-mongering of the 2010s had already fostered a general sense of dis-ease. Now, that very same ressentiment has found a home in numerous embodied maladies: the loneliness epidemic, the toxic food system, the hormonal dysregulation, the microplastics, the neurotic fixation on declining sperm counts, declining sex rates, declining everything. An emaciated social body reminiscent of Egon Schiele's degenerate fin de siècle self-portraits. All this social sickness, hypochondriac or real, contributes to the atmosphere of political decline and the prevailing sense that America, or even Western civilization itself, is ending. And then he goes on to write, some who preach the decline of the West have found their prophet in historian Oswald Spengler, a thinker who himself likens culture to biology. According to Spengler, a culture in its old age becomes a civilization like ours, rational, rigid, megalopolitan, bureaucratized, petrified, managerial, despiritualized, refined, ornamental, wedded to the politics of progress. The uselessness of conventional statecraft and digital lobbying indicates a fundamental exhaustion of civilizational vitality. If Spengler's model holds any truth, then the decay of our institutions and the protocolish virtualization of selfhood are symptoms of a greater life cycle. An aging body breaks down and decomposes, but things grow from rot. The demise of our political and social organs is a necessary prelude to societal renewal. And I love that. There's just so much that feels like true and beautiful in what he's saying here. Like I talked about this in the last podcast episode again. Like, yes, we are at the end of a social, political, etc. cycle. The society that we knew and that we grew up with just doesn't exist anymore. And we're really in this process of just changing shape, of transformation, of rupture, of change. And it kind of has to happen this way, like Shorin says, an aging body breaks down and it decomposes, but things grow from rot. And I love that line. Things do grow from rot. And one of the things that grows from rot is a new kind of body, an embodied body, a body that can feel and think and speak and laugh and cry and be in conjunction with electric technology in a much more symbiotic and balanced relationship, not this either or scenario that we found ourselves in. I don't want electric technology to go away. Like, I don't want us to get rid of these things that we have. I just feel like we need a better balance of how our bodies interact with these technologies. We need to reshape that relationship. In the Toby Shorin essay, he talks about how bodies are the foundation of what is real. And there's two things that I want to say about this. The first thing is that, yes, bodies are the foundation of what is real, which is why I'm not too worried about the body becoming a new economy, in the sense that, like, there's only so far that you can push it. Any attempts to commodify or financialize the body, they all have a limit, because the body is a real thing. It exists in physical reality. There's only so many supplements and surgeries that you can do. You can't abstract it away. So there's a limit to its use as a financial instrument, which, thank God. And the second thing I want to say is that being said, it's very easy to get lost in this world, psychologically, philosophically speaking. Like, you can live your whole life in your head. You can really live your whole life in a fantasy in your phone. And it's not until you come back to your body that you will come to know what is real. It's not until you come back to the body that you're able to make something real of your life, because your body is intelligent. It has its own built-in technologies. It knows where you need to go. It knows what you need to do. And I mean this on like a cellular level, in terms of like, okay, yeah, your body knows that you need to breathe, or it sends you signs when you have low blood sugar. But I also mean this in a metaphysical way. Your body knows when your job is good for you or not. Your body knows when a person is good for you or not. Your body knows what streams of thought it should digest, what it should spit out. Like, your body knows how it needs to move. Your body has a wisdom. Your body knows what is real, and your body will tell the truth, and it will make it beautiful. It makes me think of this Simone Weil quote where she says, "The poet produces the beautiful by fixing his attention on something real." We're all poets, and we can make beautiful things by fixing our attention on the realest thing out there, which is our bodies. And speaking of Simone Weil, Part of this embodied turn can be seen in so many places in society. New practices are popping up everywhere, and people are truly trying to become more embodied. And they're doing so both on an individual level, but also collectively. I read recently that young people are going back to church, and whether you're religious or not, like there's a reason for that. That's a collective embodied practice. And I see events pop up all over my city that are essentially just gatherings where people get together and they talk and sit in rooms with other people. The whole point of these gatherings is to be together. Run clubs, yoga, Pilates, dances, raves, cacao ceremonies, sound baths, philosophy club, saunas, craft nights, so on, so on. It's not about wellness trends. These are all collective embodied practices. In the Shorin essay, he talks about body futurism and this idea of enlightened bodies forming enlightened social architectures. And what he's talking about is essentially the formation of new and embodied relationships and communities, because that's the other thing. I talked about how our electric technology disembodies us, but it also isolates us. It separates us from others, and it focuses all of our attention on the self. Like, social media is a narcissistic technology. It's not the only thing contributing to this culture of narcissism, Christopher Lasch, but it is a big contributor. And yes, we need to think about ourselves, but we don't live on this planet alone. We live with other people. We come into this world via other people. Life is about I and thou. It's about relationships. So part of the societal turn towards the body is also about turning towards the other and learning how to be with others while being in our bodies and figuring out how to exist outside of these dying institutions and these dying structures. And part of this is about leaning into joy, tuning into hope frequencies. Guys, we have to tune into hope frequencies. We have to tune the body into hope frequencies, Listen to this podcast and then go to fucking yoga, okay? We cannot submit to alienation from the very material that we are made of. No more disembodiment. No more living through the phone. You need to be living in your body and then use your phone, We have to resist slop, starve fear, feed hope. Figure out what your body can do and get together with the next person to figure out what your bodies can do together, and so on and so forth. I don't have all the answers, I don't think anybody does, but there is an answer here. I really do believe that learning how to feel and how to be together is going to save us. And if it won't save us, at least it'll make the time pass a little bit easier. And that's really that's all we can ask for. And I'm going to read you one more quote from the Toby Shorin essay. So he writes, "For when we return to the body, when we return to share sensation, it is possible to find what brings us joy, what compounds our power and assists us in becoming more free. And this freedom, this power, this joy is not to be found in solitude, but in the joining of bodies." Beautiful, perfect. And I think that's where I'm going to end things off today. Yeah. So I'm recording all of this literally like a few days before I head to the Junos, which if you don't know what that is, it's like the Canadian Grammys. And I'm nominated and it's my first time going. And everything is kind of hectic right now, but I wanted to get this episode out to you all before the end of the week. But yeah, as always, let me know what you think about everything I've said about body technology today. You can leave a comment or DM me. All right. I love you guys. Bye.